Hey guys, welcome back. We have the Arizona truck that we brought home here, and it did not have a Tach cluster in it. So we're going to show you how to put a Tach cluster in your truck that didn't originally have a Tach cluster. Now, before you start this, every one of these has a part number in the back here, and I'll bring this in closer so you can see it. So you can see it says F4. Okay, these are the first two letters, numbers, whatever you want to call it, on the digits here. So if you have a 92 or a 93 truck, this needs to say F2. If you have a 94 or a 95 truck, it needs to say F4. Now it could say F5 or it could say F3, but I've never seen one. Okay, but if you have a 96 F150, it needs to say F6. If you have a 96 or 97 F250, 350 Super Duty, it could be F4. Now, diesels are diesel specific. Power stroke does not interchange with IDI, and IDI does not interchange with power stroke. So keep that in mind. But if you have a 92 or a 93, this should say F2 or F3. If you have a 94 or a 95, it needs to say F4 or F5. If you have a 96, it needs to say F6. Unless you go to heavy duty, which is 250s and heavier, then it could say F4, 5, 6, or 7. Now, the reasoning behind that is, on the front here, the ABS will say rear ABS for a 92, 93. I have seen some that just say ABS, but I have seen it rear ABS or ABS. And then your indicators down here, your ammeter light, which would be your battery light, is here on your 94 and up. And then on your 92, 93, it would be down here. This will be an airbag light if you have a 94 and newer, even if it's a heavy duty. However, this will be a battery light in a 92 or a 93, where the battery light would be over here in your 94 and newer. The other difference that is not obvious is your battery will not charge correctly if you're using the wrong instrument cluster. So need to make sure that you use the proper instrument cluster in your truck. And as you can see here, the part number on these is F2, 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 and then this is F4. These indicators did not change too much. Obviously the F4 is going to change with the different indicators over here, but I'm going to show you how to take your non-Tach cluster, swap your programmable speedometer odometer module, your PSOM, which is this section here, from your old cluster to your new cluster. So I'm going to show you how to get the old one out, get it swapped over, and get the new one in. So inside the truck here, we have to remove the headlight switch here and then remove this bezel. So we use a pick like this to get the headlight switch off. A lot of guys will just try to pull it straight off, but there's a slot. It's a little hard to see through the camera here, but there's a slot on the top. You'll just take your pick, put it in, and kind of just pull. And generally they will come out like that. So what you get is there's a catch in here, and you pull on this catch like this, and it releases the tension on the rod assembly over there, and it'll pull the headlight knob off. Just push that back in to turn the headlights off. And then we'll pop our trim pieces off here. Now there's a little hole along the bottom of these. Sometimes you can find it really easy. And these just pop out. So here you can see these little grooves right here. You can pop a panel tool in and pop them out. So same on that side. Now what I usually do here is I'll turn the key on a little bit, put it all the way down. The key doesn't have to be on. You don't even have to press the brake, because you can see I didn't press it down there because the key ignition isn't in run, just enough to get this loosened up. So there's two 7mm bolts here holding the bezel on. So we'll go ahead and remove those. Now there's usually clips up top here, but they're almost always broken. So you can see this thing just lifts right off of here. And then if you have a four-wheel drive selector switch over here, or if this is a diesel truck that you're messing with, you'll unplug the panel over here. But there's also the fuel selector here that we're going to unplug. And these can be very brittle and delicate, so you need to be very, very careful unplugging this. I usually use a pry tool or a screwdriver and work the plug off. So with that out of the way, we can go ahead and remove this bezel and set it to the side. If you need to move your vents or clean them a lot, you can do that now. As you can see, this one doesn't move that well, so we're going to take this one out and clean it. So to get this out, there's clips on the side here. You can see the foam's actually gone on here, but you push these little clips in over here on the side, and they will, this vent will, I do believe it goes forward out of this. So you can see that one, and then do the same thing for the other side here. And the vent pops out the front. Now this one's very, very sticky, so we're going to give it a good cleaning before we put it back in. It's probably just full of dirt, but we don't want to risk breaking it. So pull that. Want to show you pulling those out, because they're very, very simple to get out, but you got to know how to pull them out. Now I'm going to put this back into park here, tilt the column all the way up. Our next step here is I'm going to pull this lower bezel out, because this truck is an automatic, so it has the indicator cable, which runs underneath the steering column to the other side here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this lower dash panel off. Same thing, you got two 7mm, one on each side, and the top is just clipped in. So now at this point here, we have pretty good access here, and you can reach up underneath here and pull your cable off. I'll grab a light so you can see that. So you can see our cable here. Let's see if I can zoom in so you can see it a little bit better here. All right, so you can see the cable here. We just kind of unhook it off the loop there, and then there's a pinwheel down here. I don't know if you can see it real well on the camera here, but you can see the cable right here. It runs up, and there's a little bit of a wheel down here. I usually just spin this wheel to get the cable to drop out of the holder, instead of trying to unbolt the holder, which can sometimes cause it to break because it's such a brittle plastic. But before I finish that, I have to take the steering column cover off anyway to replace the boot for this. So if I take this column cover off of here, you might be able to see that wheel a little bit better. So this is the pinwheel I was talking about. Not a pinwheel, but a little indicator knob. So this is your adjustment for on your indicator on the dash here. So either winding it up or down will adjust your indicator from park to reverse. And I just wind this out, and then you can see it comes out of there. So we put it back down into first here, and like I said, I'm going to be removing this anyway because it's cruddy. You can see it's completely destroyed here. So we got a new one of these. We're just taking the third away. Then we can go ahead and start removing the 4 bolts. So there's one in each corner for the dash cluster assembly here. Now this is where this can get tricky because you got to make sure that your indicator wire is going to come out of out from underneath the column here, and then also at the same time these are kind of finicky because they kind of got to go funky to come out. But at the same time, I set them down like this and then take the screws out of the top. And I have also seen where there's not a whole lot of wire to get these unplugged. Now see, I can pull this cluster completely out. And sometimes I've had them where you can only pull them to here, depending on where the wiring is and how much they've given you. So the back side of these, like this one came out really easy, which is very unusual, but it's completely unplugged. You just got the 3 plugs here. So you have your one in the middle. This one depresses like this. This one does the same thing, depresses like that. So then we have our cluster here. Now we're going to be taking this cluster apart because we need to save the speedometer module out of it, and we won't be using the other 2 gauges. But we definitely need the speedometer cluster out, the speedometer out of it here, so that we can retain our current mileage. Okay, so we have our Tach cluster here. I cleaned it up a little bit. It needs a little bit more cleaning. However, we have our other cluster here. This is what you're looking for. Now we also have the indicator out of here. So if you have an automatic or a manual, doesn't matter if you buy an automatic or a manual cluster because there's 2 screws here, and I'll show those to you here in a little bit. You can take the indicator completely out. But this is what we're shooting for. This is how far we want to tear this down. You have this screw, this screw, this screw here, this screw, this screw, this screw, and this screw. All right, so you want to pull this plastic cover off, and then there'll be 2 more screws down here, which you can see, one here and then one on the other side. Okay, so you'll take the cover off and then also the black bezel, and then you'll start popping these gauges out. So I'm going to show you how to do all that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start taking this apart. 5.5 millimeter. Then you can take your clear cover off, which we're probably going to try to replace this one as it's got a little crack in the top there. And then there's these 2 on the bottom. And then that takes your bezel off. Okay? So at this point, I had said about the indicator. You can see that there's 2 screws here that hold this indicator in. And if you take these out, which are also 5.5, pull your screws out of there, and then you just lift that out. Now this would be a blank if it's manual. Obviously if it's an automatic, you have your selector here. So this is changeable. And I do have another one of these because it's got the broken end there, so we're going to change this anyway. So at this point, you have two clusters that look like this. Okay? So what you're going to do here is you want to carefully pop the left and right side out, and they are just terminals on the back there. Okay? Okay? And then at this point, you can pull your speedometer out. So you can see that that comes out very easily. There's actually no pins that hold this in. We'll give this a quick clean. You see it's a little bit dusty. So we'll clean this off before we put it back in. Now the only thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to go plug it into the truck and make sure everything works before I tear it apart. Okay, so I went over, put this in the truck, started it up. Everything works. The tach works, the voltmeter or ammeter, fuel gauge, oil pressure, everything works. This speedometer is showing 179,000 miles. So I'll mark that on here and I'll set this speedometer aside because we won't be using it. We're going to go ahead and use the speedometer from the original cluster because that's what we want to use. So now to get this all apart, it's the same general process. Pry these up on the sides here just very carefully, and same thing, you just have pins on the back. Same thing over here, start at the outside and work your way in. And then your speedometer pops out here. So we'll put this guy back over here, and then we'll start with the original speedometer. Now, this is a good opportunity here. You see how this moves? That is very, very common for these. So if you have any of these that move, what I usually do is I'll put a little bit of electrical tape on the top and up over, and that'll keep those in place. So this just sets down in here. There we go. Got it set down in there. And then you can go ahead and start putting your pieces back in. Now, if they don't want to go, don't force them. However, they will click right into place. They shouldn't require any real force. And then we can go ahead and start putting everything back together. So here we have a new indicator, and it just slides up in there like that. We'll set these over here for now. Now the one thing you don't want to do is go crazy with this. When it's snug, that's it, because it's just very coarse screws into plastic. Okay. Now, like I said, I'm going to clean this up a little bit more. We're going to clean this bezel up a little bit and then go ahead and replace that clear cover. So we have the black bezel here, and I ended up just not replacing this clear cover. And the only reason I showed you how to take the cover off was so that you could see the process. The bezel and the cover will come off together, but you leave this screw and this screw together. And you don't even have to actually take this stuff off to change the indicator because of these two square holes here. You can actually get down in there, but it makes it a pain to do. So I wanted to show you the whole process here. And then you just go ahead and start putting all these screws back in. So we have everything attached here. I actually went ahead and plastic polished this face here. It's nice and clean now. You can still see there's some hazing in it, but it's just the reflection of the light off the plastic. It's not actually scratched up that bad. However, they do tell you, this is, I don't know if you can see it, but tells you that I forget where it's at, but you're not supposed to lay these face down. So we actually had this one laying kind of tilted, and there was some black showing up in the actual odometer there, and it's actually gone away since I've laid it flat again. So you don't want to have these laying kind of funky for any period of time. That's why it does suck to ship these things, because you can actually send out a good one and it actually be broken upon arrival, just because the PSOM can actually go bad in shipping because it's jumbled all around. However, that's how you change one of these out. So we're going to go ahead and plug this thing in and show it to you. So we got our cluster here nice and clean. So the one thing that I do recommend doing is replacing your illumination bulbs. So this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Those are your illuminations. I always put new ones in there, and then check all these other ones, make sure that they're good, make sure they're clean, make sure they're pushed in. If you want to, you can always replace all of them, but there's a good bit to replace here. So I always make sure I change the illumination ones, because those are the ones you notice the most, and then make sure that the check engine light one's good and the high beam one's good. Those are my main ones, and then we'll go ahead and get this thing put back together. So when you're putting this back in here, you want to make sure that your speedometer is on 0 when it goes in, because if you don't, you're not going to get it to 0 whenever you start the truck up. So we can go ahead and just turn the key on here, make sure that everything lights up. We have mileage, fuel, everything seems to move, and turn signals, high beam works. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that everything works in here. So we just checked all of our illumination here. The illumination all works, which is great. So, and the truck will not start if it's gasoline and has the selector unplugged over here. So if you go to try this out and it just stalls out, the plug needs to be plugged in for a gasoline truck. The diesel trucks don't matter. However, we have some other things that we need to replace in here, but wanted to cover going over this cluster change for you. That way you can see that it's not that hard of a task. It's very, very simple, and it's easy to get a factory tach in your OBS truck. Just got to make sure you follow the breakdown procedures. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.